We seek to empower you to take action and be involved with the good of all life on Mothership Earth. And it is time for us all to really get involved, because the choices are very limited on what you can buy at the store. A lot of the stuff is poison, and many of us are finding it more and more difficult to go out and find something to eat. So the ultimate thing is to get involved with a farm, or with Green City Growers, or get involved with Rich Shin. This is the time to get involved and get in control of what we eat. So I'm going to start with Stepanie right now. If you can come up, and we'll do her presentation.
And for those who don't know who I am, I'm Stepanie Seneff. I'm here at MIT, right around the corner. That's my office. And you can't hear? I'm not on? I'm too far away.
It's on.
Just maybe a little closer. Is that better? Yeah. So I'm a senior research scientist here at MIT, and lately I've been devoting all of my energy to researching Roundup and writing about Roundup, speaking about Roundup. I'm very, very worried about Roundup. Roundup, of course, is the stuff you buy at the hardware store and use to kill your weeds in your yard. So here we go. So this is what got me interested in studying this space and looking for environmentally toxic chemicals. Autism rates are going up exponentially. That's an exponential curve, according to the CDC. And the last number is 1 in 68, which came out in 2014, 1 in 68 kids. What people don't realize is that's 12-year-olds. That's kids who are 12 years old in 2014. You've got to go out for 12 years to find out what's the prediction for kids being born today. So we go up there, and where are we? You know, it's rising very, very quickly. Well, if it's exponential, you can take a log, and there you have a line, and you can extend that line into the future. And if you do so, and you put a point at 50%, half the kids with autism, you cross the line, you come down to a year, and you go back 12 years, and you get 2032. So in less than 20 years, we can expect half the kids in this country to be diagnosed. It's born in 2032 to end up on the autism spectrum. This is, in my opinion, a disaster. And the government seems not to be worried, and I do not understand why. So for me, 6 or 7 years ago, I saw that exponential growth while it was still pretty small. And I got interested, and I said, I've got to go find out what's causing this. And I started investigating all kinds of toxins in the environment, including fluoride and mercury and aluminum and all these things, none of which were working. I mean, I understood autism a lot better because I was reading a lot about autism, but I still had things that were going on in autism that I couldn't explain with the chemicals I was finding. This is a paper, 2011, sorry, and this is where they're trying to figure out, everyone keeps saying, oh yeah, more diagnosis, you know. They're trying to pretend that it isn't happening. I think it's actually less diagnosis, because every time a child in the school system gets diagnosed with autism, it's going to be a very big expense for that school. And the schools are going broke on it, so they don't want the kids to have autism. They're going to find something else, PDD notes or social developmental disorder or some such thing. They've got these other categories they can put it into now. So I think it's even worse than what we're seeing. This is, in my opinion, the answer to the autism epidemic. And in fact, the active ingredient in Roundup is glyphosate, and that's what the molecule looks like. A rather modest-looking small molecule with extremely devastating consequences. So I'm going to start by having a section on glyphosate and autism, starting with this graph. And this graph shows autism rates in first grade as in the school system, and these are kids who get the money because they have autism. Over time, you can see it's going up dramatically. The red line is the glyphosate usage on corn and soy crops over the previous 4 years. So from the age of 2 to the age of 6 in that child's life. And these two curves coincide. The correlation coefficient is 0.997. 1.0 is the best you can get. So a hugely significant correlation between these two trends. And furthermore, the United States uses 25% of the world's glyphosate. So we've got the worst problem as far as exposure goes. And Monsanto tells us that glyphosate is non-toxic, and lots of people want to believe that. But when you look, you find out it's not true. And what they say is that shikimate pathway. Well, shikimate pathway is only found in the plants. Human cells don't have that pathway. That's the pathway that glyphosate disrupts, so we don't need to worry. Very nice story, very tidy. But it's not true. And a big reason why it's not true is because our gut bacteria do have that pathway. And they depend upon it to make critical ingredients that we need, that are essential, because we can't make those ingredients because we don't have that pathway. And those ingredients are precursors to really important molecules like serotonin, melatonin, dopamine, thyroid hormone, vitamin B6, folate. Lots of things depend upon that pathway. So the other thing is that there's other ingredients in Roundup that make it much more toxic than it would otherwise be. And they've set up the rules. They don't have to test it in the context of those other ingredients. They can put whatever they want into the formulation. When they test it, they have to test it in isolation. That's the requirement. That's the rules they've set up for themselves. And it turns out those other ingredients make it much more toxic. The other thing is that the effects are insidious. So when you eat something that has glyphosate in it, you don't notice it, you don't get a stomachache, not necessarily. You can be eating glyphosate and not know it. It's eroding your health slowly over time by depleting your minerals, by messing up your sulfur transport. Lots of things are going wrong and happening slowly. So these are the main toxic effects. It kills the beneficial bacteria in the gut. It preferentially kills them, leaving room for the pathogens to grow. And this causes all kinds of issues with gut problems. Leaky gut, inflammatory gut, celiac disease, all these things, Crohn's disease that people are getting in larger numbers. It interferes with these important class of enzymes in the liver, cytochrome 50 enzymes, which have lots of uses, but one of the uses is to detoxify other environmental chemicals. So when they aren't working, everything else becomes more toxic than it would otherwise be. It chelates all these minerals, iron, cobalt, manganese. Each one of those plays really critical roles in various enzyme actions, and they're going to be derailed because of the glyphosate preventing that mineral from being there for that enzyme. It interferes with the synthesis of these aromatic amino acids, which are the precursors to all those things I just mentioned, and also methionine, which is the principal amino acid of the sulfur system. So you're going to have deficient sulfur as a consequence of that. And so the neurotransmitters and the folate. Okay, so then also it disrupts sulfate synthesis and sulfate transport. Sulfate was where I started, and I recognized huge problems with sulfate with autism. Sulfate deficiencies in the brain and the blood, sulfate loss through the kidneys. And I was trying to find out what was causing the sulfate problem. Glyphosate is a perfect explanation for the sulfate problem in autism. So I mentioned the adjuvant, up to 1,000 times more toxic. You can see these active ingredients in these pesticides. They put these adjuvants in all the pesticides, and they increase their toxicity to the thing they're trying to kill, the weed or the insect, but they also increase their toxicity to us. You can expect that. But they don't need to study that. That's the rules of the game. So this is very scary to me.
Can I interrupt just for a minute? The definition of adjuvant is something that I recently learned, and I'm not sure if everybody here knows what it is, and I think it's a very important definition. Could you define that for us?
Right. Well, so those are actually things that are added to the mix in order to make the active ingredient more accessible to the cells. So it messes up the cell membrane so that the active ingredient can get in to the cell and then it can do damage. They're like surfactants and things like that. So that's their goal, is to make it more toxic, and in fact they're very good at it. Thank you. So this study, it was really an interesting paper that I read that pointed out, they discovered, and they were very surprised to find, that among all these chemicals that they looked at, insecticides and herbicides and fungicides, they found Roundup was by far the most toxic of everything they looked at, even though it was considered to be by far the least toxic. So it was absolute opposite of what was expected in this study. And so they have this attribution to economic interests that falsify health risk assessments and delay health policy decisions. So what's happened is they've proven to us 30, 40 years ago that this stuff's non-toxic to humans, so we love it. And we're thinking we're doing a really good thing to get rid of all these, to reduce the usage of all these more toxic herbicides and replace them with glyphosate. And so glyphosate is going up very, very fast, and everything else is not. So many of them are going down. Well, actually, recently they're starting to go up again because we've got these glyphosate-resistant weeds that are causing them to have to use more and more glyphosate on these glyphosate-resistant crops, which are the real problem. Is the GMO Roundup Ready crops, which is most of the GMO is engineered either to be Roundup Ready or resistant to some herbicide, or to have an insecticide built into the genes of the plant. These are the two basic kinds of GMOs that they have. So it's toxic, but are we exposed? I mean, that's the big question. Maybe it's not really in the food, maybe it doesn't make it through. And the problem is we don't know, because there's very little measuring going on. And this just shows you that, in fact, glyphosate, if you look at all the other herbicides up here and all the other pesticides down here, insecticides, they're flatlining. Nothing's going up. They're very steady, but only glyphosate has been going up enormously from like 1991 to 2010. Over here, we don't have much data after 2010, so we don't know what's happening, but I can presume it's continuing to go up because we're continuing to get more and more weed resistance among the GMO Roundup Ready crops. So this is what's happening. They thought it was a great idea to introduce these weeds, these crops that you could just spray Roundup on them and they wouldn't die, thinking that would be able to make it easy to do the farming because you wouldn't have to worry about killing your plant while you're killing your weeds. But the consequence, of course, is that those plants soak up the glyphosate, and so you would assume that it would be getting into the seed, into the fruit, into anything you're eating from that plant. We don't know because they're not measuring, but there's a little bit of measuring that's going on, not by the people you would expect. So this was an initiative, Moms Across America. I love Zen Honeycutt. She's a real hero of mine. She's been taking on this project all by herself, practically, of finding out, answering the question, is it in the food? And first she measured it in the people. She got breast milk from her friends. She got urine samples. She ran them off to the lab. She got testing. She found up to 1,600 times higher levels in the breast milk than the levels that are allowed in drinking water in Europe. And then she also found, Europeans had done a similar test earlier, and the levels she found in the urine of her subjects were 10 times the levels that were being found. And so her conclusion is that Monsanto is wrong about bioaccumulation. And in fact, we're finding, studies have shown Roundup in piglets, deformed piglets have Roundup in their urine, and chickens have Roundup in their meat, in their muscles, in their brain, in their spleen. I mean, it's showing up all over the tissues in these animals, which means it's bioaccumulating. Monsanto says, oh, it just washes right through, it goes out to the kidneys. And it's simply not true, I think, from the little bit of evidence that we've seen. This is a paper that was done very recently, 2014, looking at 3 different kinds of soy. This is the organic, this is the conventional, this is the GMO Roundup Ready soy. These are the levels of glyphosate plus AMPA. AMPA is a breakdown product that's also toxic. And so Monsanto themselves said 5.6 milligrams per kilogram would represent an extreme level we wouldn't expect to find. This is 5.6, so 70% of these samples are well over 5.6. So this is a study that showed that soy formula was linked to seizures in children with autism. The ones who were drinking soy had multiple folds of different kinds of seizures, 2.6-fold, 2.1-fold, 4-fold increase of these partial seizures in these autistic kids. The ones who were drinking soy milk as opposed to the ones who were drinking either soybean bean rather than milk, dairy milk, either human milk or cow's milk. So these were some of the biomarkers I had identified for autism before I started looking into glyphosate. And disrupted gut bacteria was a real puzzle for me because I couldn't figure out what was causing that. This is clearly caused by glyphosate. It's an antibiotic. It's been patented as an antimicrobial agent. I mentioned the sulfate, and I've been studying how glyphosate disrupts sulfate, and I've written about that in papers. Methionine, I mentioned before, it depletes methionine. That's the sulfur basis of the sulfur-containing amino acids. These are these important neurotransmitters in the brain that depend upon the shikimate pathway. This one is a cytochrome P450 enzyme, and it disrupts them. It's been shown to disrupt them in rat liver. These are minerals that get depleted by glyphosate. This is a product of the overgrowth of the pathogens. Pathogens produce precresol. And then these last two are based on manganese deficiency, which glyphosate has been shown to produce in cows in multiple dairies. It depletes the manganese, and manganese deficiency will lead to mitochondrial disorder and to this glutamate toxicity problem. So all of these can be explained by glyphosate. Dementia and autism have a lot in common. This is dementia along with glyphosate usage on corn and soy crops. Dementia is going up dramatically right in step with the glyphosate. Digestive system disorders, so this might be a little hard to read, but the gut microbes are turning out to be really important. They outnumber our own cells 10 to 1. Their genome outnumbers our genome 100 to 1. Their collective genome. And so glyphosate disrupts them, producing the overgrowth of pathogens, which leads to this inflammatory gut. It leads to these toxins that are released into the blood, get into the brain, and that can link to a gut-brain axis, can link to brain disorders as a consequence of gut disorders. And also obesity is linked to that. You can take the microbes out of an obese person, put them into mice, and produce obesity in those mice.
I'm sorry, I couldn't read the first line there. What does that say?
Our microbes outnumber our own cells 10 to 1.
Okay, sure.
Sorry, I shouldn't put that on. I love that picture of those microbes, but I really shouldn't do that. That's hard to read. This is a really complicated chart, and I'm going to go through it. I'm just going to point out some pieces. Right there in the left-hand corner is antibiotics, and glyphosate, as I said, is patented as an antimicrobial agent. So you're getting a slow introduction of antibiotics when you eat glyphosate-containing food. And it's been shown, actually, that microbes will become very versatile at becoming resistant to multiple antibiotics if they're chronically exposed to some one antibiotic, not even the one that they become resistant to. It gives them the skill of becoming resistant to others. And we have all these problems with MRSA, you know, multiple resistant Staph aureus and C. difficile and Pseudomonas aeruginosa, all these microbes that we can't kill, probably as a consequence of this chronic exposure to glyphosate. And then you have this overgrowth of pathogens. Up here you have the loss of beneficial, you have the reduced sulfate. Sulfate gets reduced and lost, it goes into hydrogen sulfide gas, and then you get the leaky gut. So this is sort of the pattern that I was seeing in autism that I could beautifully explain from the glyphosate. This shows the obesity problem in America going back to 1700. So this paper was about sugar, proposing that sugar might be causing the obesity. This is the obesity plot, and what's important to look at here, we were going up slowly, and then we hit 1975, and all of a sudden the slope changes and we're going straight up. That's when glyphosate was introduced into the food chain. I think glyphosate is a major player in the obesity epidemic. This is a paper on pigs, and they were eating GMO Roundup ready corn and soy, and they compared them to the ones who were eating organic. This is the organic stomach, this is the stomach of the Roundup ready exposed pig. You can see extremely inflamed. And also the uterus was also enlarged in the females. The males were more affected in the gut than the females were, and generally problems with these animals have had issues. Humans are also having issues, many diseases, Crohn's, I mentioned all of these before, Crohn's, inflammatory bowel, colitis, acid reflux, gluten and casein intolerance, celiac disease. You've got all these problems we're having with the gut. That's because our gut is being poisoned by things like glyphosate. And then we get the neurological disorders through the gut-brain axis. So I think glyphosate is a major cause of these problems. We've got now, you know, all this gluten-free stuff in the grocery stores. We've got books about celiac disease and the large increase we've seen in recent years. And this shows a correlation with wheat. So wheat, this is glyphosate usage on wheat, is this line, and then the boxes are the gluten celiac disease rates, which are also going up, but they're going up in step with the pattern of wheat rather than rice, rather than corn and soy, which makes sense because wheat is the thing you're allergic to, the gluten in the wheat. So the question is, why would there be glyphosate on wheat? Because wheat is not GMO Roundup ready. This was a surprise to me. I was trying to figure out what's going on here. Why they're using all this glyphosate on wheat? That's the question. And the answer is they have found this great new way to do business, which is to spray the crop with Roundup right before the harvest. So the wheat gets sprayed maybe 3 or 4 days before the harvest, and then the glyphosate goes into the seed and you harvest it. The idea is that you can use it very effectively with this no-till, you know, or limited till, no-till farming methods that are really becoming popular. And every time you're using no-till, pretty much you can use the glyphosate to make the no-till work, because you can kill the weeds at the same time as you're harvesting the plant, and then you can just leave it alone and not have to till the soil. And so we may be able to knock out 80 to 90% of the resistant ryegrass with glyphosate through this procedure of spraying right before the harvest. It seems insane to me that you would want to pour the glyphosate right into the food, but since they think it's non-toxic, they don't think that's a problem. And so here's a study that showed when these people who had inflammatory gut, they were given organic wheat from an ancient source. So it's a different strain of wheat, so it it complicates the story. But they got huge improvements in their symptoms as well as in their inflammatory evidence. The inflammatory factors also went down. So it's good evidence that when they went to this organic heirloom wheat, their issues cleared up. And when they went back to the normal wheat, it came back again. Okay, and we have this paper that I wrote with Anthony Samso, which discusses all the ways in which celiac disease relates to gluten, to glyphosate. How glyphosate can explain all the symptoms of celiac disease. It's a long paper with a lot of sections. I'll just highlight a couple of things here. Bifidobacteria are depleted in celiac disease, and they are killed by glyphosate, preferentially killed. So it reduces their numbers more than other microbes. Celiac is also associated with an increased risk to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. In fact, that's what gives them a shortened lifespan. That's the main thing that causes them to have a shortened lifespan. And glyphosate has also been linked directly to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. This is just a couple of examples. You can read the paper to find out a whole bunch more if you want to learn more. Okay, and then this is a study on children showing huge increases in these various inflammatory problems with Crohn's disease and with colitis in kids in recent years. And this just shows a kidney failure. What is this? Infection, right? Infection, right? And, intestinal infection, sorry. again, matching very well with the glyphosate usage on the corn soy crops in the United States. And kidney failure. I want to talk about kidney failure because that's showing up in the agricultural workers in many different parts of the world, in Central America, in India, in Sri Lanka. And they've been trying to figure out what it is. They thought maybe Tylenol is poisoning. Tylenol actually relies on the CYP enzymes, the cytokine-P-Maduti enzymes, to be detoxified. So when they're suppressed by glyphosate, Tylenol becomes much more toxic. They've also been suggesting arsenic in the exposure from the drinking water. And arsenic actually turns out glyphosate binds the arsenic, carries it past the liver, and delivers it to the kidney, where the acid environment lets it go and releases the arsenic in the kidney, according to a paper, which I'm going to get to in the next slide. This shows you the kidney disease death rates in the U.S. So we've got a kidney disease problem as well, probably also linked to our exposure to glyphosate. And this is the paper I'm talking about, which is a great paper. These people have had subsequent papers since then. They're still trying to figure out the details. They're looking at different regions. Where are they getting the kidney failure? Where are they not getting it? They've definitely connected it to glyphosate. And then this suggests also a synergistic toxicity between glyphosate and arsenic, causing it to deliver the arsenic to the kidney and unload it like a time bomb. So Sri Lanka reacted by banning glyphosate usage in agriculture, although I think they've lightened up that ban more recently. This country also followed through on that. Ecuador, El Salvador also banned Monsanto's Roundup in their agriculture. So these countries are facing these crises with their young agricultural workers dying of kidney disease. Okay, so I think we're about done. This is just summarizes this section. Our gut bacteria are so important. Glyphosate is an antibiotic, so it kills the good bacteria. The pigs develop inflammatory gut when they're exposed to this food. Humans do too, because we're experiencing all these similar kinds of gut problems. And the ryegrass problem in the wheat is causing the use of glyphosate just before the harvest. This is also done, by the way, on sugarcane and on several other crops right before the harvest. And the kidney failure is showing up among the agricultural workers that are being exposed to glyphosate in their practice. And so my big message, go organic. I hope that everybody in this room will think twice about eating food that isn't organic, especially eating food that's GMO Roundup ready. Corn, soy, canola oil, sugar beets, alfalfa. These are all GMO Roundup ready crops. Also cotton and tobacco, which cotton can go into cottonseed oil, but mostly in the tobacco and smoking. I think that may be an issue for why cigarettes are toxic. I think it's very important to go organic and also to grow organic food in your own yard if you have the space to do that. And then just to summarize, we should be very worried about glyphosate. Glyphosate on corn and soy crops correlates with the epidemic we're seeing in autism, Alzheimer's, celiac disease, and other intentional disorders and in kidney failure. And this correlation can be explained by the known effects of glyphosate on biological systems, and I think it should be banned from agriculture. Okay, and that's it.